variables within this tag. However, we do want autoplay. This is going to start the play of the video for us, and we're also going to want it to be in a loop so that it's consistently playing this video over and over again. And we're going to go ahead and put in the source as well, so we know exactly which video file to use. Okay, and we have the source attribute. Now, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're going into resources, videos, and Excursion. All right, great. And we're also going to want to specify the type of the video. All right, and let's go ahead and close that out. Just head down to the terminal. All right, and let's go ahead and commit those changes before we check. Back in the browser. So we're just going to hit up arrow a couple of times until we get our git add, and then we're also going to change the commit message to added video. All right, changes are committed. Let's go back to the browser. And back in our browser, we're just going to do the refresh again. And as you can see, as soon as we refresh, the video player does show up and the video does start playing. Also, there's the absence of the controls, which is exactly what we wanted. And we're going to start adding in the additional subheaders and the other image. Let's go ahead and double check the design mockup just to see what we're adding. Okay, so back in the design mockup, we have the video added, and below this we have a separate header. So it looks like this header is actually a lighter font weight, even though the font family is the same. Changes are committed. Let's go back to the browser. Okay, and we have the source attribute now. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we're going into resources, videos, and excursion. All right, great. And we're also going to want to specify the type of the video. All right, and let's go ahead and close that out. Just head down to the terminal. All right, and let's go ahead and commit those changes before we check in the browser. So we're just going to hit up arrow a couple of times until we get our git add. And then we're also going to change the commit message to added video. All right, changes are committed. Let's go back to the browser. And back in our browser, we're just going to do the refresh again. And as you can see, as soon as we refresh, the video player does show up and the video does start playing. Also, there is the absence of the controls, which is exactly what we wanted. And we're going to start adding in the additional subheaders and the other image. Let's go ahead and double check the design mockup just to see what we're adding. Okay, so back in the design mockup, we have the video added, and below this we have a separate header. So it looks like this header is actually a lighter font weight, even though the font family is the same, and the font size is going to be a little bit different. So that's a pretty good indication that we're going to have to do a different heading style for this. Also below you can see that we have the subheader, and this also has a different color and font size. So let's go back over to the code editor and we'll figure out how we want to structure these. Alright, so back in the code editor, we're going to go ahead and just give ourselves a little bit of space here. And initially, our largest header was set as an H1. And the next header that we're using is going to be slightly smaller. So let's go ahead and set something like H2. And we're also going to need our subheader below that. And the subheader is about half the size of the header above it, so we're probably going to set that as H4. Now let's go ahead and pull in the text and then we'll do the styling. Okay, so after double checking the design mockup, the text that we're going to add is your personal travel guide. All right, and there's no punctuation at the end. Then we're going to go ahead and add in the submenu as well. All right, and I'm going to just go ahead and correct any spelling mistakes that I've made. Now, bear in mind, we are using a punctuation mark on this subheader. All right, great. So now that we have the overall structure and content, what we want to do is change up the styling on it. So let's go ahead and organize this CSS file just a little bit more, as we do have a link here and we have a heading, but we're also going to make another heading and a subheading. So one way that I like to organize this is just by putting in a comment. And you can make a comment in CSS just like this. And I'm just going to put this in all capitals so it's nice to see. I'm just going to title that headings. Also going to make a copy of that and paste it in here and change that from headings to links. And we'll save. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and style these headings and then we'll do a couple of commits. Following the case that we had before where we had header main, let's do header secondary. Alright, great. Based upon the design mock, the things that we had viewed that weren't going to change here are the font family and the centering. The color is not going to change either. However, since we're not setting color globally, we're definitely going to have to copy that over. Alright, and another thing that did change on here was the font weight. So we'll copy that over, and according to the design specifications, our font weight is going to be 300 as opposed to normal. And again, we noted that the font size was going to be different on this one. So we're going to change that from 50 to 42. Alright, great. So we have our class of header secondary. Let's go ahead and apply that to our HTML before we forget. We're just going to put in class, paste in header secondary, save, and we're off to the races. And since we're already here, let's also put in class, and we'll leave that blank for a moment as we go and style the subheader. And we're just going to copy this and put a dot in front of that just to make sure it's a class. And instead of naming it header secondary, we're just going to call it subheader. Subheader. That to our HTML before we forget. We're just going to put in class, paste in header secondary, save, and we're off to the races. And since we're already here, let's also put in class, and we'll leave that blank for a moment as we go and style the subheader. And we're just going to copy this and put a dot in front of that just to make sure it's. A class, and instead of naming it header secondary, we're just going to call it subheader. And I'm going to go ahead and put a nice dash in there just to clean that up a little bit. And let's go ahead and switch back over to the design mock really fast, just so we can verify that we did this one correctly and that we're getting the content correct for this. Alright, so back in the design mock, we can see that for our secondary header, we did set the font weight correct, we did set the font size correct, and we have to go ahead and just double check this for the subheader. Looks like we want the font size to be 21, and this time we want the font to be gray. So let's go back to our code editor and we'll implement these changes in our styling. Great, so back in our code editor, we're going to go ahead and implement these font sizes. And we're also going to want to change the font color. We're changing the font size to 21 and the color is going to be gray. So again, we're going to remove that hash and we're just going to stick with the plain gray. That should be good. Let's go ahead and copy over the class that we just created, and we're going to put that into the blank space that we had in the HTML document and hit save. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and commit these changes. So this time we're going to add the message, let's see, created secondary and subheaders. All right, and commit is made. Let's go ahead back over to the browser and just sample these changes. And back in our browser, we're just hitting refresh. Now, as you can see, we do have our header, our call to action, the video, and the work that we just did with our secondary header and the subheader. Well, we're making great progress. Let's go ahead and check the design mock again, and we'll see what else we have to add. All right, so back in the design mock, looks like we're on the home stretch. We have to add in a couple of more components. So we're going to put in this image, and let's go ahead and focus on the icon as well. So let's head back over to Code Editor, double check the notes that we had copied over from the task, and we'll implement these images. So we're back in our Code Editor, and let's see. So here's an important note. We definitely want to wrap our images in paragraph elements. And that's the last little bit of the task, so I'm just going to go ahead and close that. We no longer need that. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of paragraphs for us because we are adding in a couple of images. Then we're going to want to go ahead and create our image tag. Now, here's a nifty little thing in a lot of code editors. Sometimes there's a nice little hotkey, so you don't have to do a lot of double duty in typing. So I definitely recommend checking if your code editor has this feature. So we're just going to type in image, source, and let's see, the source for both of these is going to be different, so we definitely don't want to type in the same thing. All right, so the first one is going to be resources. This one is going to be an image, and this time we're going to use camp. Then let's go ahead and copy this just to save ourselves a little bit of time. We'll paste this in here and just remove the part that is different. And then we can put in phone and we're good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save. And because we already did style the body class and set everything to center that way, we may have these centered just because they're wrapped in a paragraph tag, but let's go ahead and double check our hunch in the browser. All right, back in the browser, doing a refresh. Oh no, our images aren't showing up. Let's go ahead and troubleshoot. Okay, so we're back in our code editor and we're troubleshooting what the issue was. Now, I know I threw a little bit of a curveball at you, but this is something I want you to get pretty familiar with. This process is referred to as debugging. As you can see here in this source, we don't have a slash prior to resources. However, in these sources down here, we do. So let's go ahead and, for continuity's sake, make these the same. Let's save our change, go back to the browser, preview it, and we'll see if that's fixed the bug for us. So we're back in our browser, and we see this buggy little section here where these images aren't showing up properly for us. But let's do a refresh. And hey, look at that. The changes that we just made resolved our bugs. The images do show up the way that we want. So let's go back to the design mockup and see what else we have to add. So we're back in our design mockup, and we can pretty much see the finish line at this point. Because look at this. The secondary header that we have down here doesn't have any additional directions or instructions. So we're going to go ahead and assume that the designer wants us to just repeat pre-existing elements. So we already have this set up with the secondary header, and we already have this link set up with call to action. So let's go ahead and go over to our code editor. We're going to go ahead and save these changes in Git, and then we'll just implement this new markup and go ahead and style these. Back in our code editor, we're going to go ahead and add in those additional components. And as we saw, these were already created for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this markup that we already have because the size of it isn't going to change, and nor is the class. The only thing that we're going to change on this is the content. So here we're just going to type in exactly what's in the design mockup, which is coming soon for iPhone and Android. All right, cool. Now we're also going to want to put in a link, and we did that earlier as well. So let's go ahead and copy that. We'll paste it in. Again, the structure of the markup's not going to change, the class isn't going to change, and actually, looking at our design mockup, we're not even going to change that either. The CTA is going to be the same. Let's go ahead and hit save, and we don't have have to go back to style.css because we already have those stylings. So let's go ahead and commit these changes as well. First, we're going to add, and then of course, we're going to add our commit message, footer text. All right, great. So changes are committed. Let's go ahead and go back to the instructions really fast just to see if there's anything else we may be missing. All right, so we're making solid progress. After reading through, it looks like we've already completed step 9. And since we're on top of things and we've been committing our entire journey and committing in opportune moments, we can go ahead and check off step 10 as well. Okay, and in step 11, it looks like there's a little bit of a curveball. What we want to do is push these to a GitHub repository, and within GitHub, we're going to want to set up GitHub pages so that it's automatically displayed for us. Then, after we have it set up to GitHub, we're going to want to go ahead and complete the footer and complete any sort of styling. So let's go ahead and get started on step 11. And back in our code editor, since we already did the git commit, all we have to do is git push, and all of our changes are now pushed up to the cloud. Let's go back to our browser and just manually verify that these changes have shown up. Now, since we are adding images and we're also adding the video, it will take a little bit to update and upload. Now, as you can see, it's resolving and it's complete. All right, back to the browser. We're in the browser looking at our repository. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. Awesome. And now you can see that we have the resources directory. We also have these different timestamps here, and we have these different commit messages that we've been adding throughout the process. So let's go back to the directions. We'll go ahead and check off this step, and we'll move on to the next one. And back to the instructions, we're going to go ahead and check off point 11. And I'm going to go ahead and proceed to step 12. We'll go ahead and finish up the remainder of this, which is just the footer here. Then we're going to go ahead and push our changes to the GitHub repository. And I would recommend setting up GitHub pages just so you can view our overall work live on GitHub pages. And we're back in our code editor. As we just saw on the directions page there, we did see that our text was right aligned, and it looks like the text color was also gray. So let's go ahead and copy this paragraph here, and we're probably not going to need this link section. So let's go ahead and remove that and remove the markup tag. Now we're going to want to go ahead and change the text content to Excursion. And we're also going to want to put in a copyright symbol. All right, and I'm just pasting this in from a Googled link. You can definitely find this on Google if you don't know how to create it. All right, so we have the markup that we need now. However, we don't have a class that's applied to this. So let's go ahead and over to Style CSS and we'll set that up. But first, let's go ahead and put in a placeholder of class and we'll leave that nice and blank. Now we'll head over to style.css and let's see, it's not a link. It's not necessarily anything to do with a heading. So tell you what, let's go ahead and make another section and we'll call this footer. All right, great. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this overall style that we have here just to save us a little bit of time. We definitely don't want this to be aquamarine, however. So we're just going to go ahead and copy the property of gray and replace aquamarine with gray. All right, let's double check the design spec just to verify what the font size is. Okay, so back in the design spec, we can see that this excursion text here hasn't provided a font size, so we're going to assume that it's the same font size as this subheading here, which is 21 pixels. All right, back to the code editor. And in the code editor, we're going to change this to 21 pixels as we just saw. Now, we also want to align this text to the right. So let's go ahead and type in text align. right. Let's call it copyright. Then we'll go ahead and copy our class, give a save to the style, head back over to our markup, and paste that directly into class. Alright, great. Let's give that a save as well, and that should pretty much complete where we're at. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're doing an add, and let's add a nice little commit message of final push. And we're also going to do git push so that this gets synced with GitHub. Awesome. Great. Now let's go back over to the browser. We're just going to preview it one last time. Back in the browser, we're just going to preview our hard work. Going to go ahead and refresh this. And now as we see, the subheader here is added. We have the call to action text, and we even have our right align text that we just added in. So this looks quite similar to the design spec, though I would highly recommend whenever you're working with a designer to double check it yourself and then triple check the work yourself. Tag up with someone else that you respect just to get an outside opinion to make sure that your design and your code match well. So let's go back to the instructions and we'll go ahead and tick a couple of boxes. We have completed the footer. Awesome. I'm not sure about you, but I'm pretty satisfied with our end product. It does look very similar to the example here and the design mockup. So let's go ahead and just tick that box as well. And we've already pushed our changes, so we're good to go. Well, hopefully this has been helpful for you. My name is Benjamin Spack. I'm with Codecademy, and I'll see you in a future video.